Thank you, Samuel. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank Michael Getz and Nancy Brine and Sam Nixon for convening us for this Divinity dialogue. I acknowledge the deans here and Julia Witkovich-Devoy. I got that right, didn't I? All right, good. I was so hoping that Wendy would be here because I want to, and I will be in touch to let her know that I think the Divinity School ought to do more of what it did to get her into the Defense Department, because it's a strategy for world peace to fill up the Department of Defense with Divinity School graduates, and ought to get some results out of that. This event is billed as a platform for us to share our vocational and personal stories. And my remarks are grounded in the personal. The clothesline I want to hang everything on tonight is a clothesline called transformation. Transformation. I want to take you all the way back to a sanctuary in North Philadelphia. And I was 5 or 6 years old. And my father was the preacher of the New Thankful Baptist Church. He was the pastor of that church. And this is a second-story sanctuary in North Philadelphia, not far from Connie Mack Stadium, which no longer exists. And I watched him. He's about 250 pounds, 6'3". I watched him use words to transform the lives of those people in North Philadelphia. And for me, at about 5 or 6 years old, it was an event to go into church. My father would stand up and he'd read from the Bible. He would close it, and then he would start slowly and speak words, not all of which I understood. And then at a certain point in his offering, his sermon, his voice would change. It would elevate, and then it was on. Okay. He would put his right foot out and put his hands on the platform, the podium, and he would take it to another level. And I would watch, and this was my father, and I was quite proud of him because I saw him just using words, just speaking words, and people would get up and run up and down the aisles, and they would be excited, they would be crying, they were seeing and feeling something that was leveraged by what he was speaking. And I, as a 5 or 6 year old kid, was like, wow. Yeah, that's my dad, but wow, this is it. These broken North Philadelphians now at least believe they are whole, at least temporarily. They went from sad to glad. They went from lost to found. They went from hopeless to hopeful, all because of words. And to me, I didn't have that word then, but the word that would eventually settle in my mind and in my life and my experience, the word was transformation. And that became the theme and intention of my life, and what I hope to be the impact of my life. I said, I want to do that. Whatever I do, I want to be able to transform people from wherever they are to a new place, to a higher place, to a better place. All right? Now that's backdrop for you, because that's where my story starts, and if God is willing, that's where my story is going to end. Three things I want to share about transformation. First is transformation at Morehouse College. All right, transformation at Morehouse College. I was transformed at Morehouse College in a number of ways. And the metaphor is when I got to Morehouse College, I was 5'3.5". I kid you not. When I left, I was 6'1.5". All right, that is the truth. But transformation was my story, and there was a poignant moment at Morehouse for me. I met Benjamin Elijah Mays. He visited campus, and I ran and got my copy of Born to Rebel. And I made my way over to him, and I asked him to sign it. I'd worked on his campaign, so he was running for the school department position there. One hands down, there wasn't much work to do. He's Ben Mays, you know. But he asked me. He said, "How do you like Morehouse?" He said, and I said, "Dr. Mays, I actually love Morehouse, but I don't always like it." And he said, "Why not?" I said, "Well, it's not run very well." I mentioned a few things, and he said, "What I want you to do is I want you to finish. I want you to go out and learn a few things. And I want you to come back and fix it." That's the truth. That's true. And he had written a book recently at that point called Disturbed About Man. And so, Disturbed About Man. And I started a line of articles in the campus newspaper called the Maroon Tiger. And my series of articles was called Disturbed About Morehouse. And that's when I started my kind of wondering and imagining that our institutions could be better. Wondering and imagining that our institutions could be transformed. All right? Transformation. The second, and I should also pause and mention that it was an experience at Morehouse College that provoked my attendance at Harvard Divinity School. All right? I had a lot of questions growing up, a lot of questions. I was not feeling entirely the Christian construction of reality. Okay, I had a lot of questions about it. So I wanted to find a structured experience to get at that, try to understand it. So I thought Divinity School was next. And yes, I was influenced by the pastor of the church in Atlanta, there right near the campus, Friendship Baptist Church. His name was Bill Guy. And he's a graduate of Harvard Divinity School. But a bigger influence than those was the fact that there was a brother around campus. He was not a Morehouse student. He used to hang out at the AU Center. And he would stand on the corner at one point or another, and he would talk, and he would tell us that we were being miseducated. His name was Brother Africa, all right? And he said, "You're going into these classrooms, and you're getting this Eurocentric education." And he said, "You're not being told the truth." He said, these black college curricula are mimicking what others have done. And these curricula need to be transformed into something that's truer. And he said, "You need to know, all of you are Christians, you need to know that the Christianity and all the major Western religions had their roots in Africa." And I said, "What?" And see, that to me was right up my alley because I was questioning the whole thing. And I said, "Whoa, what is that about?" And I went and talked with a few professors. They gave me a few books. I asked, why aren't you teaching this? They gave me some guidance. And so I decided, in my talks with Bill Guy, I decided I'm going to find out more about that. And so I majored in the history of religions at Harvard Divinity School. All right? That was my focus. It was my emphasis. And my intention was to then get a PhD somewhere in that field, but there was no such thing as what is now known as Afrocentrism, right? No such thing then. I searched all over Harvard, and I even traveled down to a few other institutions, including Princeton, where there was... That's Cheryl Saunders. She's here. She was at Harvard Divinity with me, and she knows why I went down to Princeton, because there was a professor there that I heard about, and his name was Kane Hope Felder. All right, and I traveled and I talked to him and I said, you know, I'm real interested in this. I want to study further and I want to get a PhD in it. And he said, sit down, son. He said, that's not going to happen because there's nobody who will take you on in this. This is too outside of the mainstream. And he advised me that, he said that your best option is to go to try to take over a school, run one, and get the curriculum to be truer. Maybe that stuff you're talking about is for a different generation later on. Transformation. Next step is MIT. I won't spend a lot of time there, but I understood. I went to the ed school and got deep into HBCUs. According to the strategy I had outlined to go see if I could get equipped and positioned to run a school, a person who had a profound influence on me, his name was Peter Gomes. I spent many hours in the Sparks house at that fireplace talking one-on-one with Peter Gomes. And I told him the story about Kane Hope Felder. I told him all my story, and I said, I need some help. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. He introduced me to Charles Vert Willey over at the Graduate School of Education, a Morehouse man. And he was a tenured professor at the Graduate School of Education. And Charles Vert said, come on over. You need to do a master's and a doctorate in administration, planning, and social policy. And then you need to do some key things to get you situated to run an institution. Right? And right now, I want to pause and acknowledge Jonathan Walton. All right, he's in the room. He is not the new Peter Gomes. He is the real Jonathan Walton. Yeah. All right. All right. As much as I love Peter Gomes, I know this brother right here is going to do something that is unique, and uniquely Jonathan Walton. And I give you all the encouragement you need and give you a shout out from Morehouse College. All right, he is a Morehouse man. All right. I just want to say that. All right? So I finished at the ed school, and again, this theme of transformation is working inside of me, and I go to MIT. Now, I was offered a vice presidency at Tuskegee, all right? But I met just a few years earlier this really striking young lady from Decatur, Georgia, who happened to be doing a PhD in electrical engineering at MIT. And she wasn't finished with her doctorate. I was finished with mine. And I said, I could leave Cambridge and her and be in Tuskegee, Alabama, or I could find a way to stay here. And I found a way to stay in Cambridge. I'll see you later, Tuskegee. But my passion was HBCUs, but I started working at MIT. Started in the president's office. And I won't go too long here, and I want to make sure I respect the time. But eventually made my way to, I started managing money, all right? Understanding how they manage money. And I did an I did an analysis of their financial systems and did a development program for them, HR kind of thing. And I was learning management of money. And then they had the nerve to announce that they were going to go after $700 million in a capital campaign. And I said, wow, in order to manage money, you got to have it in the first place. So I want to find out how they're going to do this. So I did some investigation and ended up being assistant director of corporate development. And within a few months, I came up with an idea that turned into a $2 million chair for MIT. I said, let me investigate the alumni who are about retirement age or so, and who are also CEOs. And I did a database and got a list of them. And then I said, let me see if there are any MIT alums on the board of the companies at which they are CEOs. And I found that out, and I made a phone call, and it'll go nameless, but I called one company. I said, you're an MIT grad. I'm John Wilson, et cetera, and CEO is MIT grad. He's been talking about retirement at all? He said, as a matter of fact, he has. He said, well, he's a graduate of the mechanical engineering department. And wouldn't it be cool if the board and the company, as a retirement gift, made a chair in his name at MIT in the department from which he graduated? This guy said, wow, that's a great idea. We were just wondering what we're going to give him. And so I worked with him and the other board members, and they came up with about $500,000, and the company did the rest. And at that point, I was on the map at MIT. Right? And I made my way up. We did that $700 million campaign, and by the time we did a $2 billion campaign, I was a director. And that was a great story for me, example for me of transformation. But in my spare time, I was head of the Morehouse Alumni Association, and we managed to raise $1 million in endowment, never mind the expendable, $1 million in endowment for Morehouse. And that to me was the more impactful transformation that I did at MIT. My wife gets a job offer at U Maryland. We decide we're going to move in this area, and I start working at GW. We have 3 kids by this time, twin girls and a son. And I become dean of the Virginia campus and transform that place in ways that I want to skip over. But I want to go now to the third and final story, and that is I stepped down from my deanship because Steve Joel Trachtenberg said he was leaving GW, and for whatever reasons that meant they weren't going to do anything too bold. And I was quite bold in my ambitions for that campus, and I wasn't going to sit on my hands until they found a new president. So I took leave from the deanship and said, I want to get back to my passion. I want to start studying, doing research on, and doing a course or two on black colleges and on fundraising. And I was doing that and very passionate about it. And on a Sunday afternoon, actually a couple weeks before this phone call came, I wrote a 3-page essay on what should happen for HBCUs now. I've been writing a book that I was going to call From Needy to Nimble, all right, the story about HBCUs. And my phone rang on a Sunday afternoon, and it was the Deputy Undersecretary of Education, Bob Shireman. And he said, we heard that you have some interest and passion about HBCUs. We have this position here at the White House. We want you to come in and talk about that. I said I'd be glad to. And he said, by the way, have you written anything? And we hear you're writing a book, but have you written anything? And I said, are you sitting by your computer right now? He said, I am. I hit send, and it was that essay that I'd written a few days before, and went in, and everybody had that, and had conversations at the Ed Department, Arnie Duncan, the White House, and was named to that position. And the issue was transformation. President had announced the 2020 goal. By 2020, we want to have the most educated, diverse, and competitive workforce in the world. We haven't been number one in the world as a nation since 1995. We are now number 16. We were 16 then, 19 now. And we know in order to be number one, we need to have about 8 to 9 million more college graduates than we do now. And by our analysis, 2 million of the 8 million, I'll say, need to be African American, and about 170,000 need to come from HBCUs. That right there is significant because HBCUs were wired into the high expectations of higher education in this country by this administration. That's not trivial, okay? There was an expectation set for HBCUs, and I just need to say that we managed to transform the way this office does business. I could not have done that without the pivotal help that I got from a man that I called up out of Georgia. His name is John Brown. John, I want you to stand. John is in the back. He's my deputy director in the office. Just stand, please. All right. JB is no bias. JB happens to also be a Morehouse man, and a Harvard Business School graduate, and a Harvard Divinity School graduate. He went to B school first and studied prophets, and then Divinity School to study prophets, and then came to work with me. And we have transformed the office. And I leave him in the office as the acting executive director, and he's going to stabilize that office, get it to where we really wanted it when I left, and then we'll see what happens next, since he is a Morehouse man. Final thing I'll say. We good on time? Good. Okay. It has been a joy. I can answer any questions you want about the Obama administration. It's been great working there. But when the call came from Morehouse, I said, now that's a call I can answer, right? I'm going to start on January 28th, all right? And my goal is nothing short of transformation. We set up a cathedral strategy while at the White House. I can say more about that, but it's when you are excellent in every way, operationally and academically. But I want to say this about my next step. Meeting Ben Mays was significant for me, and I told you what he told me. But some of you may not know that Ben Mays was on a mission in his life. He went to Morehouse to be president from the deanship of the Howard Divinity School, where Cheryl Sanders Carswell is now a professor. Cheryl attended Swarthmore with my wife and was at Harvard Divinity with me and is now a professor. I'm sorry, with my sister, not my wife. I said my wife. I said my wife is on my brain right now. My sister. And she knows this story well, but Ben Mays was on a mission because he wanted to overhaul the way Howard Divinity educated in order to overhaul the church leadership in the country. He was troubled by the nature of church leadership. He wanted to add some robustness to it, wanted to strengthen it. And so that was his agenda. And he left short of completing that. It was unfinished business when he went to Morehouse. But I want you to know that Martin Luther King Jr., whom he mentored and had a pivotal hand, according to King, in creating, Martin Luther King Jr. is the individual expression of what Mays tried to do institutionally at Howard. Let me say that again. Martin Luther King Jr. is the individual expression of what Mays tried to do institutionally at Howard. All right? And I'm learning a lesson from that, because I want to go to Morehouse and essentially replicate some of that at Morehouse. I want to, create more Kings for civil rights and equality and fairness, because we are not post-racial, right? So we do need more Kings in that area. But I want to see the King of chemistry and the King of biology and the King of sociology and law and business and medicine in every way. And that's what we have not had an HBCU to yet do. I say it's a combination of capital preeminence and character preeminence. And those two things have not, those unreconciled strivings, I'll call them, have not yet coexisted on a single campus anywhere, black or white. And I want to be first at Morehouse to have capital and character preeminence going on at the same time. I'm going to go back as a proud Morehouse man, and I'm going to go back as a proud Harvard Divinity School graduate. Thank you very much. Q&A now?
Yeah. Thank you much. Appreciate it. It's our privilege now to, after having heard John share in his own way some of his story and just a glimpse of what has led him to the evidence of leadership that he's given in the areas that he has worked in, and the service that he has rendered, and the giving that he has inspired, and seeing where he's headed as he gives us a glimpse of what he wants to see. This is our time now. We want to say thank you again for sharing that, John. Mm-hmm. And as you now have come to hear, this is our dialogue portion of it. So we're going to invite everyone now to take some time to, having reflected on what he said, to raise your questions that you might have of John. And for all of you to know, we are recording the session because this will be used in the future for our Harvard Divinity Dialogues to make available to a wider set of those who can't be here. So you should all be aware that we are recording. And in that context, we'll have a microphone for you that will be around the room. So we'll have someone to take the mic around and share it with you. Is that Nora? That's Nora. Nora with her hand up in the back. We want to recognize, thank you for your service and help too. So we're going to ask you to raise your question. Try to keep it as concise and clear as possible. And John, if you will, to respond as he so chooses to the questions there. Okay? I will call on those as I see the hands that are there. I see. And would you also identify your name, if you would, and if you do have a Harvard affiliation, what school or what affiliation you have there?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Winterbourne Jones. My mentor, Dr. Jason Curry, is a Harvard alum. I'm a proud Fisk man for all the Morehouse persons in the room. Men, rather. My question is, what would you say to a young person my age? I'm 24, I finished at Fisk. I'm at Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School finishing my master's of divinity. And I'm interested in returning to Fisk as you are now returning to Morehouse. You were inspired by Dr. Mays. I was inspired by my godmother, President Hazel O'Leary, which just left Fisk as president. What would you say to me as I begin to map out my career in acquiring the skills necessary to return to our HBCUs and lead them one day?
I think this mic is on.
Yeah.
It's good that you're at Colgate. Harvard Divinity is a great place to be, too. Just kidding. Listen, I will tell you that what I recognized while I was at Morehouse and what I recognized certainly from this position I'm just leaving at the White House is there is a condition that we struggle with in our HBCUs and throughout higher education, and it's what I call capital impairment. All right, we certainly do not have enough money. It's financial capital, but it's other kinds of capital as well: human capital, information capital, etc. To compete and to educate. Higher ed is rapidly changing. So you need to, if you're aspiring to bring leadership to higher ed, I really encourage you to keep abreast of the changes that are going on, but understand what high-end capital is and what capital enlargement means and how you do that. The title of the book that is still on the shelf that I had to put down in order to take the position at the White House is From Needy to Nimble. And you need to have a definition of what nimble is institutionally. Not one of our HBCUs is nimble, not one, all right? And I'm going to keep my answer short, but let me just say this, just to get a little bit technical. A measure of strength now is something called the endowment expense ratio, all right? It is a ratio, it's a fraction. You put the endowment, the amount of endowment in the numerator and the amount of money you spend every year in the denominator. And your endowment expense ratio should be somewhere between 5 and 10. That means the amount of money, the amount of endowment you have should be 5 to 10 times larger than the amount of money you spend every year to educate. All right? Harvard and Yale and Stanford are at 12 and 13. All right? Anybody got a guess at what the strongest liberal arts institution by that measure is? Endowment expense ratio? Princeton. Not Princeton. Liberal arts institution. Small liberal arts. Not university, but liberal arts. Say? No, not Swarthmore. Williams. Not Williams. Nope. Oh, who said that? Okay, Cheryl. Cheryl Blunt, Grinnell. It's Grinnell. Grinnell got over 20. They spend about $75 million a year, and they're over $1 billion in endowment. They are nimble. They can do what they want to do. They can, with a board meeting, decide that we're going to be free this year. We're not going to charge anybody anything. They can double all faculty salaries if they feel like it. That's nimble. And we don't have an HBCU that's anywhere close. The strongest HBCU by that measure is Spelman. Spelman. And their endowment expense ratio is 4. All right. Every other HBCU is less than 4. All right. As a matter of fact, there's no HBCU other than Spelman that has more than 2. Not Howard, not Hampton, not Morehouse, not Claflin. No. So understand that and things like it, and orient yourself to achieve that kind of outcome, and you'll be fine.
Okay, we have a question up front here.
I think your vision is great, and I think I just dropped my wine, so sorry about
That's
that.
fine. There's more.
There is a crisis now with college graduates not having jobs. Very well educated, but not being able to fill the pipeline that is so narrow. What are some of your thoughts on internships and the robust nature of what it's going to take to make sure that there are jobs for these well-educated people?
That's a great question. I spent many years in Boston and Cambridge, and while there, I became very impressed by Northeastern University. Northeastern University had this co-op approach to their education where they got you pretty much after your freshman year associated with businesses that were somehow aligned with what you thought you might be interested in. And they got you internships, especially during the summer, but also through the academic year. I want to answer the rest of that question in the context of what I might imagine for Morehouse. But Morehouse has such a tremendous network. There's a list of 600 to 700 living doctors in the alumni ranks of Morehouse College. And of course, I see them as a fundraising cohort target, right? but also they are situated in places where our pre-med students could get a look-see, get some real practical experience. And even if they're not going to go to med school, they can understand what it is to be in the work environment. I think you have to do that because not everybody has the kind of connections that their parents can give them with a phone call to get them situated and get them on their way. I think our institutions can do a better job in setting up those real work experiences for our students as they are being educated. Final thing I'll say about that is this shift toward STEM is very real, all right? And I'm inclined to say, and going to Morehouse, it doesn't matter what your major is. You can major in Shakespeare. You need to have a quantitative foundation under you, no matter what you're planning to do, or else you're going to find yourself on the outside of the job marketplace, all right? You need to, even if you're in the liberal arts, you need to understand what it means to have quantitative competence in any number of areas, computers and otherwise, and just understand whatever you're doing from the quantitative angle. All right.
Okay, we have another question, I think, up here, up front. And I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, if you would stand when you ask your questions,
Sure.
just so we can see you better and be able to take the pictures there.
I'm Andrea Usim. I'm an MTS from 2001,
Mm-hmm.
and coming from the news media, as I do, we've seen in the news media how digital media has completely deconstructed the entire value chain of the news industry, and now we see that happening in higher education.
Mm-hmm.
So the way knowledge is produced and consumed, by definition, all things brick and mortar are being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Harvard has been a leader, as has MIT, in putting courses online.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the Divinity School should be doing more online, and will Morehouse be doing more online? Got to make some news here.
Yeah. All right. That's great. Well, while in my White House position, we invited Sebastian Thrun to the White House to meet with a subset of HBCU presidents. And then JB and I took a subset of HBCU presidents out to Udacity, Sebastian Thrun's company. And he is a leading voice in MOOCs, right, in online education. Mm-hmm. And as a result of those interactions, Morgan State University became the first HBCU to sign on with them to go down that path, to get some courses, not just online, but some MOOCs courses, massive open online courses. So there's your answer. Obviously, I think it should happen. As for the Divinity School, I would think so. All right? Because I think we want to stay current. But I suspect, just as there's going to be a Morehouse way of doing that, there is a Harvard Divinity School way of doing that. And I would encourage us not to be cookie cutter and just do what everybody else is doing, but I think we can be very thoughtful about that whole enterprise and tease out of it the HDS voice in that area. Now, I have some preliminary thoughts about that, but I want to save that for Morehouse actually. But but I do encourage it because I think it is a way to get out there into the marketplace a lot better than we do.
Okay, I see two more questions here. Let me take one from the back, and then we'll take one up here. Please stand and identify yourself. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eleanor Giddings Ivory, and I was the class of '76 at Harvard Divinity School. And I can relate to your story of the school not being prepared to help you with the studies you wanted to pursue. As I was finishing my Master of Divinity, I thought I would stay around or go somewhere to study the history of the black church between the colonial period and the Civil War, and was told by the school that no one could help me with that because there was no help available. Is it better now? It's been 30 plus years. Can our institutions help people like you and me who may want to pursue those particular interests of our particular community?
Well, that's not for me to answer. I don't know if the Divinity School folks.
We have a couple of our academic dean is here, and maybe he can say.
Well, undergraduate as well. I mean, some
okay.
hallway.
I know, I'm going to take a hard look at Morehouse shortly. There has been some movement in the curriculum at Morehouse, some diversity, if you will, ironically. Is there as much as there should be or can be? No. Is there as much as we can afford? Yeah. I think to a certain degree, when you begin to stretch out a bit in your curriculum and give faculty the freedom to just think outside of the box and go where their imaginings take them, you need to purchase that for them. That is a lifestyle. And that is a lifestyle that I hope is a legacy of my presidency at Morehouse, because I want to get faculty in to have a lifestyle similar to the lifestyle they could have at Harvard or Yale or Grinnell. They can go where their imaginings take them, and then they can give some new cutting-edge, world-class ideas to the students in front of them because they've been given the time. They're not overloaded with coursework. They're not teaching 4 courses per semester and don't have time to think or research. So it's almost a lifestyle question at an HBCU. And we can't change that lifestyle until we get more resources to do that. I've kept some tabs on HDS, and I know that it's certainly better than when I was there, although I don't think it is at a point where I could have gotten where anybody else could get a PhD in what I was interested in when I was there. I don't know if you all want to comment on what has happened from a curricular standpoint.
I was going to say at this point, if we do want to, because I know we got a couple of questions, but if any of our dean or professors here would like to make a comment, please feel free to.
Yeah, I'd like John.
And could you stand too, so
Sure.
we can? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, the short answer to your question is that yes, you can do what you aspired to do in 1976 somewhere in the country. Are there as many positions, or are there as many religion departments out there where you can do this at a very, very high level? No. I will say that at Harvard, one of our aspirations this past term, one of the items that Dean Hampton and I talked a lot about was to bring distinguished African-American historian of religious studies in America to Harvard, and we are going to do that in the next 2 or 3 years. But this does link into a question I had for you, John, which was, we would like more such professors to be in not only religious studies, but in the humanities in general. And I was wondering if you could think out loud with me about how you could do that. But I want Jonathan to respond to that question as well, because not only is he our new Pusey minister, but he's a trained ethicist and he knows an awful lot about African American religious history as well. So, John, would you take this?
I'll respond to your question first. Yes, absolutely. Right. But it actually goes beyond that, right, in terms of your wanting to be able to, at Harvard Divinity School, be able to study, say, the black church within a particular period. And that's really because of the vision of our previous dean. When I was hired on the faculty 4 years ago, I was brought in, I was trained as a social ethicist, right, and I do religion, media, and culture. It was a broad search in African American religions. 2 of us were brought in. I specialize in African American Protestantism, what some people call the Black Church. There was another professor, Aisha Belisa de Jesus, who focuses on kind of transnational religions of the African diaspora as they take root in places like Miami and New York and California, largely based in Cuba and the Caribbean. Myra Rivera was brought in Latin American religions, right? And she's a theologian. And she engages people from the radical Orthodox thought, the Levinas, right, and engaging with Caribbean thinkers. Well, the reason I'm explaining it in this way is because the vision of the Divinity School now is not to have any of these particular fields studied in silos, if you will, intellectual silos, but really we're trying to be capacious in our understanding. And so therefore, anybody we hire in American religion, if they were to want to study American religion in a particular time period, right, you don't come to me to study black people. You don't go to David Hall to study white Puritans. You don't go to what was Lee Schmidt and Marie Griffin, Lee Schmidt to study wacky religious people of the 19th century, right? But all of us have expansive training. My work in evangelicals, right, I deal with so when I'm looking at teaching Pentecostalism, I'm not only teaching about African American Pentecostal Church of God in Christ, I'm not only teaching about Assemblies of God, the majority white denomination, but I'm also talking about Native American influences, right, in the Church of God in Indiana, and Latin American influences out west. And that's what we kind of expect out of all of us, right? And so that no matter what you're examining, issues of race, issues of ethnicity, issues of gender and sexuality are at the center, right? So that we graduate students who understand themselves as not only global subjects, but if you're a man, you're a gendered subject. If you're a white male, you're a racialized subject, right? And that's why I'm excited to be on the faculty of Harvard Divinity School. Pusey minister is just kind of my second job right now.
Okay. We would be remiss if we didn't mention Marla Frederick, too. A professor at the Divinity School. Her appointment is in religion in FAS, in African American Studies, but she does most of her teaching at the Divinity School, and she and I have a long-standing working relationship. We actually both write about televangelism, and we go back. I was telling President Wilson, we go back to when I was in Morehouse. She was at Spelman, and we were friends there and through Princeton and the like. And so it's really an exciting time right now at Harvard Divinity School. Yeah.
Thank you. We had one question here, and we'll have time for just 2 more. So if we got one other one after this, so we'll have an opportunity to fellowship a little bit.
My name is Claudia Farris. I'm from the Harvard Business School. I want to go back a minute to your personal experience. Your father, when he was creating that transformation in his congregation, was undoubtedly moved by the Spirit and by the words came from the Word of God. So my question to you is, to what extent has your faith played a role in your commitment to transformation?
I might have to stand up and get over here and stick out my right leg here. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but a profound impact. I mean, everything I've done, I think I've hit on all your themes of leadership, service, and giving. I regard myself as my objection to the Christian construction of reality growing up. It wasn't doing enough for me. And I finally found my home, my depth of faith with Howard Thurman. All right. I got to Morehouse and I stayed in Thurman Hall, and I asked the question, who is Howard Thurman? And that took me on a journey, and I'd say that I'm more a mystic than anything else, all right? Because Howard Thurman is, I got a chance to spend a week with him while I was at Harvard Divinity School. He chose 10 Divinity School students from all across the nation. I was one of them. Got a chance to spend a week with Howard Thurman, and that really confirmed that his kind of rhythm in Christianity was a good match for my rhythm. It was very natural for me. So I wasn't into all the drama of Christianity, though my father was and will always be my true hero, just because of the power, and that got me into words and the life of the mind. And but that the mystical approach speaks truest and best in terms of my own faith. And one of my favorite, I've read everything Howard Thurman has written, but right beside Howard Thurman, there's this little book called by John Sanford called The Kingdom Within. If you've never, if you've read Howard Thurman and don't find mystical Christianity accessible, get The Kingdom Within, and you won't turn back. Amen? All right.
Amen. One more. We have time for one more, I believe. Dr. Sanders.
My name's Cheryl Sanders, and I'm HDS. So long ago, 80 and 85, I did a MDiv and THD at Harvard. President Wilson, one of the greatest influences by his own testimony, at least in his intellectual development, Martin Luther King, was Mordecai Johnson, who was for many years president of Howard University. And my question is, in view of your projected agenda, your goals, your vision for your leadership at Morehouse, and the kind of leadership impact you want Morehouse graduates to take, how important will preaching be in your leadership?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh man.
And I just say that while you're trying to collect your thoughts. Mordecai Johnson was a great preacher. And one of the things that he was able to do as a preacher who was also an effective president is to project a certain image of the university to the broader community with transformative words. Yeah. So I'm just asking if you would regard him as a model or as an inspiration for the way that you will be able to use words. You won't necessarily be a preacher, but that's kind of what I'm asking. As a president, you can't help but give speeches.
Right.
But my question is, will you also craft for yourself a pulpit from which you can address the kind of values and character formation that you see as desirable for the Morehouse men of the future?
And it's ironic that she raises that. It's ironic that Dr. Sanders raises that because if you don't know, Dr. Wilson is also an ordained minister in the church.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I appreciate the question and the brilliance of the question. All right, I just want to say that. I have two answers. One is that's a tightrope. And it's a tightrope because what I've come to understand, especially in the last 3.5 years, is there is amidst and beyond African Americans a stereotype of leadership. And it is the leader as preacher, pastor. And obviously for years we've been well served by that. I think there are some diminishing returns for us with that model, especially in higher education. If you look at the condition of HBCUs, a lot of them are, for lack of a better way to state it, run like churches. And that's a huge problem. All right? It's a huge problem because they're not churches, by the way. And a lot of the boards are run like deacon boards. All right? That's a problem. So then to step into this mode of leadership where I'm the president preacher begs that perception and those perceptions and that lack of sophistication and becomes a slippery slope. And so it's a tightrope. Now, on the other hand, on the other hand, it is also true, and I have had in mind that I may do it once a quarter, preach, but I am developing a theology for my leadership of Morehouse College. There's no question about that. And it's going to be grounded in the fact that the first thing God does with Jesus, beyond his miracle birth, is to establish him as an intellectual. Let me say that again. Because the next thing we find him doing after he is in the manger is we find him in the temple debating the experts and stumping them. He is established as an intellectual. Hello, life of the mind. Okay? That's his first base of expertise. He is smarter than everybody. That's a theology for our HBCUs and beyond. Okay? We don't hear that enough. These megachurch preachers wouldn't go near that theology. It doesn't serve them well. All right? I got a real critique about that. I told you Ben Mays' work to overhaul the black church and its leadership is as yet unfinished. And it's a bigger challenge now. So what I can promise you is this, Cheryl, to your question. I can promise you that as we look forward, we are going to ensure, if we can't change every preacher, I can at least ensure that a Morehouse preacher is a different animal altogether. Hello, John Walton. That they have a different voice, that they're not cookie cutter, that because of what happened on this campus and because of the theology, seasoned as it will be, that is coming from the president himself and is laced through the campus in some strategic ways. The Morehouse graduates who then go to Harvard Divinity and the other divinity schools and then go into the various churches around this country are going to be distinctive in some measurable, detectable, and profound ways. That is a goal worth having, and as Peter Gomes would say, nothing more is required and nothing less will do. Thank you.